I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. We hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Football continuing as we go through the first ever Black Friday game, which we will get to in a little bit. But we are all here with you today. Matt, Dennis, and I all here getting you ready for a big Week 12 in the NFL season. How are you guys feeling after 3 games on Thanksgiving Day?
Not great, Bob. Not great.
Yeah, the one that mattered most to you did not turn out the way we were anticipating.
Now, at least they fought back a little bit in the end, but no, Jared Goff can't give up 3 fumbles like that. It's not great.
Just hoping tonight's game is going to be fun, but what we got? Is it Tim Boyle starting tonight for the Jets? Yeah, I'm not. Good thing there's some great college football games on tonight. That's what I'll say. College football is going to make up.
I don't know if when the NFL set their first ever Black Friday game, they envisioned Tim Boyle starting for the Jets, but welcome to the NFL 2023. We will preview all of the Week 12 games. Before we get to that, though, we'll look back on the Thursday football. We had 3 big games on Thursday. The first, Green Bay Packers came to Detroit. I saw an ominous stat right before the game that said Detroit has never won on Thanksgiving Day when there's a waxing Gabanius moon, which is what we had yesterday. So I'm just going to chalk it up to that. But Green Bay looked good early, got the 29-22 victory. Matt, we have not seen Christian Watson have a huge role this season, but they went to him early and often yesterday. He got 5 for 94 and a touchdown, easily his best game of the season. Is that a promising sign if you like Green Bay?
I mean, I think it has to be. I shouldn't say we expected him to be a wide receiver 1 for fantasy, but they drafted him early enough for him to be the leading wide receiver for that team. He has had some injuries and everything. Maybe this is them finally working him into being the guy. I mean, what was it? Yesterday was the first time he had been over 40 yards receiving since was it like week 4 or something like that? Like he's not had a good season whatsoever. Maybe what we saw yesterday is what they plan on doing with him down the stretch. I think that they should kind of use him that way, and I kind of hope that they do. I liked what I saw out of Green Bay yesterday. I mean, Jordan Love for fantasy has been a really good quarterback. So far this season, he has not been, but I think with what he showed yesterday and what Watson showed, this offense could be very intriguing. They're getting a couple of those defensive pieces back. Like, I'd like to see them feature Watson the way that they did, and maybe this team can at least make the playoffs, but I would still be hesitant to believe that's going to happen. I need to see it for multiple weeks, but it was good to see him use that way.
Yeah, first time this season that Watson has had more than 3 receptions in a game, which kind of tells you his role has slipped off. Dennis, I know you mentioned you were happy that you saw him fight back a little bit, but a second consecutive game with a bunch of turnovers at home. This time they couldn't come back. Are the cracks kind of showing up here for Detroit a little bit?
The offensive line is supposed to be one of their, things they can hang their hat on. And when you're giving up that kind of pressure on Goff, what did they have? I think 4 sacks, 3 fumbles created, 1 which was returned for a touchdown. Actually, was it just 3 sacks, all by Rashawn Gary? So I know the Packers have been waiting for Gary to come around, and he did IDP managers right this week. As far as the Lions go, he got the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown and to David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs had tied for second on the team in targets with 8 behind with Laporta and behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. So for fantasy, the right players are getting the ball. You know, Montgomery, he put out 71 and he had the touchdown. So that's kind of what you're expecting from him in that Jamal Williams role. Is as good as Montgomery is in the passing game, he doesn't have the dynamic thing that Jahmyr Gibbs has. Jameson Williams, you know, he's continuing to earn, while not a lot of targets, they're consistent enough and of the type that he's making plays. So he had another long catch. I'd like to see Williams get up over 5 targets a game, or at least 2 5 targets a game, and I'll feel a lot better about him. But right now, the offense runs through the running game and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Laporta. So Williams is the 5th option in that offense. And normally they're putting up more than 22 points, so it doesn't matter. But they've got to figure out, like, what did they do on defense that allowed Goff to be under pressure so much these last 2 weeks? Because as high flying as we've been about Goff the last couple years, that was really the thing that the big knock against him was he doesn't react well under pressure. And if teams are going to get him under pressure, well, not only will we see fumbles like this, we're going to start to see interceptions as well, and 3 and outs, and none of those are good for the Lions.
Yeah, well, and I would like to see their defense get a little bit. Their secondary got torched early yesterday, which was mildly disconcerting. On to another game that was not particularly close. I guess it was 23-10 into the fourth quarter, and then Dallas really put on a show, got the 45-10 victory. Dennis, you know, Sam Howell, 28-44, had 300 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, did have the rushing touchdown. Washington now 4-8, kind of sliding out of contention, possibly some changes this offseason. Do you think Howell can be their guy going forward?
I think he can be. He needs to, you know, he's not a guy that is going to consistently elevate everybody around him. So he needs protection, in part because I think Sam Howell thinks he can make plays more than he can. Kind of Baker Mayfield has that same syndrome. You know, I can make plays, but when you're running a 5 flat, there's only so many plays you can make. Howell's got a good arm. I think he reads the defenses pretty well. He's got to get rid of the ball, and he had been doing that a lot better. My concern right now is it looks like, you know, Ron Rivera is on the way out, and I think Bieniemy will be going with him. So they'll have a whole different offensive staff that's probably going to want to bring in their own guy. So what does that mean for Howell going into his 3rd year? You know, he'll get a quote unquote chance to compete, but you know, I'd like to see him be able to be in a stable situation. Unfortunately, it feels like his career is going to be one of these where he ends up being in situations where the coaching is consistently changing, or he's changing teams. And that's why the coaching is changing, and he'll end up not reaching his potential. You know, Brian Robinson had an okay game against Dallas. You like that Howell got 300 yards passing. Curtis Samuel had a great game. McLaurin, the other guy that you want to see getting targets, Jahan Dotson, all the guys that should be getting the volume were getting the volume. Dallas was the far superior team.
Yeah, record-setting game for Deron Bland, too, with 5 interception returns for a touchdown. As many touchdowns, they said, as George Kittle and Travis Kelce.
One less than Kenny Pickett, I think.
That's true. Pickett's 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Not great, Bob. Well, Matt, you know, I know you've got to be happy being in that Dallas area when the Cowboys win. You all win, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Brandon Cooks has got kind of a slow start, but the last few games seems to be picking it up, has found his way into the end zone, more of a role. Is that a promising sign for Dallas as they get closer to the playoffs?
Let's hope so. I mean, he was targeted, even going back to the New England game, almost 4 times a game. There's a couple that it kind of dropped off. San Francisco, Philadelphia, he was only targeted the one. But over the last couple weeks, 9, 3, and 4, all 3 of which he has been very good. Only broken top 20, though, in fantasy 3 times this season, which is not pretty, at least not what we expected out of a guy we thought coming into this offense would be a great number 2 to CeeDee Lamb. Kind of the guy we had all hoped Michael Gallup would be, and just because of the injuries couldn't do it. I don't know about so right now he's sitting at wide receiver 6. Obviously, only 3 games have been played. It was wide receiver 3, though, a couple weeks ago against the New York Giants. I don't know that we see him be that good down the stretch, but I do think we could see him be a consistent wide receiver 2 if they continue to get him the ball. I think that's a massive part of that offense, is to kind of get somebody else or allow the defense to focus on somebody else besides CeeDee Lamb. I am hoping that they continue to kind of get him the balls. He looked really good last night, but I'm not expecting that. I'm not expecting wide receiver 6, wide receiver 3, probably more like the wide receiver 20 range that he was back against the Chargers. You're muted.
Third game of the night was also not particularly close, as the San Francisco 49ers got the 31-13 victory in Seattle, moving to 8-3 and giving themselves a little bit of cushion. Matt, Deebo Samuel missed some time earlier this season with injuries, but he looked like he was running pretty hard last night, got a rushing touchdown. They let him throw the ball, led the team in targets and receptions and passing yardage. Do you think he's kind of all the way back now? You're muted now. We just trade off.
Son of a gun. I'm doing the 2 computer experience now, and I always forget to look over to make sure I'm unmuted. If you roster Brandon Ayuk like I do in a lot of leagues, I think we're all hoping he's not back, but he definitely looked it last night. He, 79 yards receiving, did have the rushing touchdown. I imagine they'll continue to use him that way. I don't know that he'll get back to the workload he was, let's say, for times last year. They may give him 1 or 2 more weeks. I mean, San Francisco's head into the playoffs. There's no reason to rush him back. But yeah, he looked really good last night, and I imagine he's going to keep on that role heading toward the playoffs for the 49ers.
Dennis, Walker missed last night, so we get to see Zach Charbonnet kind of carrying the load. What did you think of what you saw against a tough defense?
Yeah, I thought he ran hard. He's not the explosive back in that backfield. He's got decent speed if he gets a little time to build up. He's got good vision. He's got good power even. But he only had 3.4 yards per carry. They only gave him 14 carries, and getting your butt whooped against San Francisco, you're probably not gonna be running the ball a lot, but they didn't throw the ball a lot either, only 27 times. Charbonnet earned 4 targets there, caught all 4 of them. He didn't have a super productive game. It was a situation where they're up against a great defense, and while he got the volume, he had outsnapped Walker for the previous 3 games, or previous 4 games, and now with Walker being dinged up, that was obviously going to be the case. Will that continue when Walker gets healthy? I think Walker will always have a role because of the explosiveness that he has. And Pete Carroll is kind of a wild card when it comes to the, who's going to get playing time when. And so it'll always make you a little bit nervous. I think Charbonnet is the more well-rounded back, but the things Walker does well, he does exceptionally well. So I look for it to continue to be a split going forward, and a headache to fantasy managers.
Well, and Seattle has a lot to play for because they're firmly in that wild card race, so they're going to need to make some moves here. Well, let's move on to the rest of the games for Week 12, and that starts with the Black Friday game, first ever Black Friday game. The 7-3 Miami Dolphins at the 4-6 New York Jets. Dennis, as of this morning, it looks like Devon Achane is not going to play, and we know that Salvon Ahmed now on IR. So, what are you expecting from Mostert and Jeff Wilson?
And it's Darren Eventon times, baby. Now they did add Eventon to Darrington Evans. I'll get that name right eventually. They did add him to the roster. Now, I think that it really bodes well for Jeff Wilson with Ahmed out. Wilson will be the number 2, and we've seen him be productive. But this is a Raheem Mostert. I expect even when Achane is healthy, Mostert's going to continue to get a lot of the volume. The Achane injury is confirming the priors on both sides of the aisle. Oh, he's, injuries, they're fluky. You can't count on them. You can't predict them. It's going to happen to everybody. There's lots of examples. Or, oh, he's too small. He's going to get injured, so it'll hamper his volume. Well, we've seen he doesn't need a ton of volume. Well, Mostert is 31 years old or 32 years old now. And he's not a huge guy either. I think he's another one of these 5'11", 200-pound backs, 205 maybe. And for Mostert this week, the Jets can be run on. And I'm not overly concerned with his production this week. The Jets are super against the pass. I think Miami will still get their passing opportunities because of the talent they have in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They're gonna make some stuff happen in the pass. But with Mostert and Jeff Wilson, I think they're going to be able to effectively run the ball against the Jets also.
Meanwhile, Matt, for the Jets, the Tim Boyle era begins. What are you expecting?
Not much, Bob. Not much. I don't think it's going to be great. Probably going to be better than Zach Wilson, though I think anybody who's watched the Jets over the past couple of weeks, that bar is set pretty low, so I don't think we're expecting much. He played, am I misremembering this? He played fairly well for them at times last year, did he not? Like, I don't think it was that 2 years ago?
Boyle was on the Jets. I think he was on Mike White. That's the other.
Oh, it's Mike White. I'm thinking of Mike White. Yeah.
Mike White will be at this game. Not for the Jets.
Not for the Jets. Yeah, my bad. But I think that he'll be better than Zach Wilson. I guess the only thing we really care about is, like, can he continue to get Garrett Wilson involved and have him have a good day? That's Breece Hall, but he doesn't really affect Breece Hall as much for the fantasy angle. Just get Garrett Wilson involved, please. I roster Garrett Wilson in a lot of places, Mr. Boyle, and I need him in some tough spots. I need Garrett Wilson to come through for me, so I'm counting on you.
You're saying the 2 receptions from 9 yards last week?
It was not great. It did not.
Yeah.
But I hold people to a very high standard. If the 2 for 9 did it for you, I'm not judging. Didn't for me.
I am going to take the Dolphins.
As am I.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 5-5 New Orleans Saints at the 4-6 Atlanta Falcons. Matt, Derek Carr has cleared the injury protocol and is looking to get back onto the field for the Saints. Can he get this passing game going again?
Let's hope so. He was fairly good early on. I do think that they can get back to that. I don't personally view Atlanta's defense as a team that will hold them back. I actually think this game could be very intriguing because I don't think the Saints defense is necessarily that good either. But I do think that Derek Carr can get the passing game going again, which will be great for, I don't really roster anybody on the Saints, I'll be honest with you, so it don't matter to me, but I do think he will get them going.
Chris Olave.
I actually only have like one share of Chris Olave, but good shout. I forgot about that.
And tight end wonderkin Taysom Hill. Dennis, Desmond Ridder back as the starter, they said, for the rest of the season, whatever security that provides him. What are you expecting in his return to the starting lineup?
I'm not expecting anything different than what we were getting before. He's going to have games where he can't complete a freaking pass. Hopefully he learned a little bit of a lesson in that you get the ball to Drake London and Kyle Pitts, no matter what Arthur Smith says. But Smith will call a ton of running plays for Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, and he's going to get Jonnu Smith involved. It's going to Arthur Smith. I don't know why he hates fantasy players so much, because all we want are his guys to play well. And it's like he just keeps saying, look, you guys are turds. My guys are not going to play well, okay? And I don't know. If he survives the season, it's going to be a miracle. I'm dumbfounded in his approach to playing football.
If they make the playoffs, he might survive. If they miss, I think he's probably out. I am taking the Saints in this one.
I'm going to go with the Saints too.
I'm taking the Falcons.
Matt wants the Arthur Smith experience to continue. He's hoping to have Arthur Smith and Frank Reich in the same division together for the next decade. Absolutely. Next up, we have the 6-4 Pittsburgh Steelers at the 5-5 Cincinnati Bengals. Dennis, the Steelers finally moved on from Matt Canada. What are you expecting from the new look Steelers offense?
I don't have any idea what to expect, to be honest. These guys, they've got two guys in charge of the offense, and they still have Kenny Pickett. Deontay Johnson and Najee Harris have both kind of been a little bit outspoken in the run up to Canada's firing. So I feel like that we're going to get a little bit of squeaky wheel getting the grease coming into this game. So they like Jaylen Warren, so they're going to continue to use him. Tomlin has named him the starter, and Harris will be the change of pace thumper. George Pickens and Deontay Johnson are still going to get the. I don't think their volume is going to change. Johnson's going to be the heavier targeted guy. Pickens is going to, in any game, Pickens could have more catches and more yards just because he makes big plays. And then we got Pat Freiermuth coming back too. So I'd like to see, them start to get back into a little more balance and calling plays that keep the defenses off balance a little bit, and maybe give Pickens a little bit of a shot. I don't know I don't think Pickens is much more than a game manager, but at least give him a chance to manage a game that's close. So if they can sustain some drives, let the offense, run the ball a little bit, mix it up. It's honestly, for me, the jury's going to be out for a couple weeks until I see what these two guys do. These two new coordinators.
Well, some changes for Cincinnati too, Matt, as Joe Burrow out for the rest of the season. What are you expecting from the Jake Browning experience?
I'm actually fairly intrigued to see what Jake does here with the Cincinnati Bengals offense. I mean, let's start with the easy part here. He's got incredible weapons all around him. So like that part alone helps him in a major way. He was actually a very good quarterback in college for Washington in the Pac-12. It was actually a guy that I kind of liked coming out. I was surprised that he wasn't a higher draft pick. He knows the offense. He's been there for a couple of years now. I think that he can slide in. You're not going to get Joe Burrow numbers from him. But if you're sitting there on the waiver wire, if super flex league and you needed someone to step in for Joe Burrow, you don't have that other backup. Like I would start him over Desmond Ridder. And I'm a big fan of Desmond Ridder. Browning can bring some rushing production. He's not going to bring you kind of what Desmond Ridder could bring you, but even his last year in college, he had over 130 yards rushing. He's not even as fleet of foot as Joe Burrow, but he can bring you something there. I think that he's going to be fine. I mean, it's Trevor Siemian is the other quarterback on the Bengals roster. Is that correct?
He's on the Jets.
Is he? I thought he was on the Bengals.
Because he's the reason Zach Wilson is third string.
I'm doing a really great job of remembering backup quarterbacks today. Regardless,
Simeon was on the Bengals, I think, last year.
Gotcha. I do think that Browning will be a okay play for them. I mean, I don't know this week about going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but rest of the season, he's a guy that I'd probably be willing to play.
I am going to go ahead and take the Steelers.
I'm going to ride the Bengals.
Going with the Bengals as well.
AJ McCarron is their third string quarterback.
Makes sense why they went to Browning.
Yeah. Well, I think they have a couple of guys listed there, but McCarron is looks like number 3. Next up, a kind of crucial matchup for the playoffs and for the AFC South, and that's 7-3 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 6-4 Houston Texans. Matt, in the run up to the bye week, when that had that huge running streak, Travis Etienne was on fire. He has not been spectacular the last 2 weeks. 6.4 points in week 10, 8.9 points last week. How important is it for them to get him going?
I mean, it's massive for a dude who, as you mentioned, was on fire early on in the season, has not been the past couple weeks. Granted, San Francisco's defense is pretty good against the run, as is actually Tennessee. Like, I didn't realize Tennessee, they're kind of in the middle of the pack, but they're still a fairly good defense against the run. The Houston Texans are one of the better teams against the run, though. So I will be very intrigued to see if he gets going. I think they need to rely on him. I mean, he's someone that I was like massively wrong on this year when we talked about him in the preseason. I think I said he's probably going to be an RB2. I believe he's currently sitting as RB3 on the season. Like, he's having an amazing season. And that right there is why they need to get him going. You can't rely completely on Trevor Lawrence, as we've seen while he's having a good year. They need to balance out this offense a little bit. They need to get him going, but if I'm being honest, like, I don't expect him to be RB38 and RB25 the last 2 weeks. I don't think he'll be that bad. But again, this Houston defense have only allowed 965 yards this season. They are a top 10 defense against the run. I think Trevor Etienne is going to have Travis. I'm thinking college. Trevor is at Florida currently. Sorry. Travis Etienne is going to have a rough day again on Sunday.
Dennis, for the Texans, Tank Dell and CJ Stroud have really formed a big connection. Dell now up to wide receiver 16 on the season. He had a fairly good game the last time these two teams played, when the Texans were able to beat the Jaguars in Jacksonville. Are you expecting another big day today or Sunday?
So the Jags are kind of middle of the pack in fantasy points to wide receivers, but CJ Stroud trusts Tank Dell. He's developed a real nice connection. Tank has had top 20, wide receiver 20 or better finishes in 5 of 9 games so far. And I think that because CJ trusts him, he'll keep going to him. I struggle with, buying into a 5'8", 165-pound wide receiver long term. But I think at this point, because the team trusts him, the quarterback trusts him, and he keeps making plays, you got to keep rolling him out there and expecting that top 20 performance. He's finished in the top 23 the last 3 weeks in a row, and I think he's going to continue on riding that hot streak. It's helped that Devin Singletary has added a little balance in the running game. I think we're getting close to getting Dameon Pierce back. I don't know what Pierce will bring to the table, but that they certainly like what Singletary's putting out. And they've got other wide receivers that are playing well in Nico Collins and Noah Brown, who was out last week, and even Robert Woods has popped up here and there, and Dalton Schultz at the tight end position. So they have a balanced offense. Their offensive line is probably playing as well as it has all years. They've started to get they've gotten a couple guys back over the past few weeks. And so, yeah, I think you keep riding Tank Dell as a top 20 play.
Noah Brown, still a non-participant in practice, probably a long shot to play, but Dameon Pierce, to your point, is off the injury report, so it looks like he will be back. I'm choosing anarchy. I'm going with the Texans.
I'm taking the Texans as well.
I find it hard to not take the Texans, so I'm going to go there as well.
Another player I was very wrong on, CJ Stroud. My goodness.
Well, and if the Texans get the win here, not only will they be tied atop the standings, they will have the tiebreaker by having the season sweep. That would be, if he wasn't already looking at coach of the year prospects, DeMeco Ryans could sew that up by winning the division. Next up, 4-6 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the 5-5 Indianapolis Colts. Dennis, how are you feeling about Baker Mayfield? He is quarterback 15 on the season for fantasy, a points per game average that's better than Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, and Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr.
Is it better than Deshaun Watson?
I'm sure it's better than Deshaun Watson. Points
Imagine
per game.
that. Go Cleveland.
Deshaun Watson in 15.1, Baker 16.5.
Go Browns. Go Browns.
So Baker is, kind of having a quintessential Baker year. He's completing 65% of his passes, got 15 touchdowns. He knows, and he's executing the mission. Get the ball to Mike Evans and then to Chris Godwin. Rashad White is playing really well in the receiving game out of the backfield. He isn't doing great on the ground, but they're not asking him to. I think their coaches have looked at their offense and said, well, we can't block for the run for shit. So we'll run a little bit to kind of, try to keep teams off balance. But I mean, even Cade Otton is playing well at the tight end position. I think depending on the matchup, Otton is streamable at the tight end position. But coming into this year, I think a lot of not so much fantasy players, but fans were wondering, are they going to be able to get Mike Thomas his 1,000 yards for his 10 straight 1,000-yard season? And Baker Mayfield was like, yeah, I may get him that by week 12. Let's get rolling here. And Godwin's play has suffered a little bit, but Mike Evans is being productive. And I'd like to see Godwin step up. They haven't had a third wide receiver step up consistently. Sometimes Palmer has done it. Sometimes Devin Tompkins has done it. I think they really miss having Russell Gage in that role. But I like Baker. I think that, he's got the team playing hard. The reality of the situation is they just don't have the talent all around all over on both sides of the ball. So they're not probably going to make a run for the playoffs. But if they can stay mentally into games and, embrace playing the spoiler role, I think it looks good for Baker going into next year.
Meanwhile, for the Colts, we've seen Jonathan Taylor work himself back in, has been getting a lot of the work the last few weeks. Matt, is he back to being kind of a borderline top 12 option for you?
Yeah, I think he has to be. He's extremely talented. I mean, he's finished already as a top 10 RB twice against Cleveland and Carolina, was RB 17 last week against New England. Now, granted, Tampa Bay's defense against the run is good. They are currently 4th in the league. So I'm not expecting him to go out there and have a massive day, but I still believe that Jonathan Taylor is one of the best running backs in the NFL. I mean, Indy technically not out of it. They've got to do everything they can to keep winning and make the playoffs. As Dennis just talked about with what Baker's been doing in that offense, I think this could be a fairly close game. I think that the Colts should and will rely on Jonathan Taylor. He will I don't know if he finishes top 12 this week because, again, Tampa Bay's defense is as good as it is, but I don't think he falls out of the top 15 this week. So I'm definitely starting him and expect him to be a top 12 option moving forward.
I'm going to take the Colts in this one.
As am I.
I'm going Buccaneers.
Baker believer. Next up, just a scintillating battle. The 2-8 New England Patriots at the 3-8 New York Giants. Matt, the Patriots still haven't committed to a quarterback. Can they get the offense back on track?
I don't think so. I mean, this is just can we say it's the worst? I feel like it is, but I don't know that statistically it actually is. It's not, which is surprising to me. Steelers is, which is not surprising because Kenny Pickett and his small hand sucks, and we've said that for a long time. No, I don't think so. I mean, how's the saying go? You have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any, or however that thing goes. Like, you've got to commit. Yeah, like you've got to commit to somebody. They sit here and they blame Mac Jones for this. I mean, dude doesn't have a wide receiver. Can Bill just leave? I'm asking for a friend. I'm asking for you, Mike Valerie. If you're watching, if you listen to this, I'm asking for you. Bill Belichick has really screwed this up over the past couple years. I don't think that they're going to get back on track. I'm avoiding everybody but probably Ramondre Stevenson on this offense.
Meanwhile, Tommy DeVito coming off of his easily the best game of the season for him. Do you think he keeps it going, Dennis?
Bill is going to try to confuse the young guy, and they don't have a great offensive line. As much as I want to, have DeVito be a cool story and play well, they don't have squad at wide receiver. Darius Slayton stepped up last week, and then he promptly got injured. I'm not sure if he's even playing this week. Saquon Barkley had a phenomenal week last week. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Ramondre replaces Saquon as the RB1 this week, because I think the Patriots this week, based on what the Giants do, need to run that offense through Ramondre Stevenson. But with DeVito, he wasn't a great college quarterback, and he got thrust into a situation that he wasn't ready for. And he's just gotten a little bit better every single week. And whether that's a testament to him doing some work or Brian Daboll doing some work, whatever it is, it's going to be a real test, because as bad as New England is, Belichick still throws a lot of stuff at young quarterbacks on the defensive side of the ball. So DeVito's going to have to be able to figure that out. I think that his answer is going to be Saquon Barkley, and I think that's where Belichick will focus, is trying to take away Saquon Barkley. So can DeVito, make something happen with Wan'Dale Robinson or somebody else, Jalen Hyatt? If he can get a little bit of time and get the ball downfield to Hyatt, maybe he can make some things happen. Daniel Bellinger flashed a little bit last year. There are some opportunities. It's just the offensive line for the Giants has just had a rough year, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. DeVito is the most desperate of desperation starts at your QB2 position. He's the perfect start if you're tanking, because he's a quarterback and he's going to play, and it's probably not going to be good.
I think whoever the Patriots throw out is probably your most desperate of desperation QB2 starts. But DeVito's not far behind. Darius Slayton, limited in practice, still officially questionable, has a neck injury, though, not promising. I am actually going to take the Patriots coming off the bye.
Give me the Giants.
Next up, the 1-9 Carolina Panthers at the 3-7 Tennessee Titans. Man, just another banger of a game this week. Dennis, the Titans have a pretty good rush defense. What are you expecting from Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders?
Well, the Titans' rush defense is kind of falling apart here lately, and I had such high expectations for Miles Sanders coming into this season. Now, by high, I don't mean like RB1 or an RB1, but I felt like he was a top 20, top 24 option on a weekly basis, that he was going to get the volume. I don't think Chuba Hubbard is a special back by any stretch of the imagination. And if I keep extrapolating that out, apparently Miles Sanders is not either. But their third guy is Raheem Blackshear. So in a nutshell, they don't really have a running game in Carolina, and they're not doing so great in the passing game either. I would expect that Hubbard's going to start. They're going to split the duties and see if one of them can get hot, even just a little bit against the Titans. They'll start to lean that direction. Which one it'll be, that's a great question. Like, these are, if I have to start one, I'm more comfortable starting Hubbard, because I feel like he's the starter and he's going to get the first shot. But I do think Sanders is a little bit better pass catcher than he gets credit for, and maybe even a little bit better than Hubbard. And I think Sanders is a little more of a dynamic runner as well. It just hasn't come together for him this year, whether it's him not picking up the offense as quickly as needed or what. Sanders has had an ultra disappointing season. If I had to start one of them, I'm starting Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, I actually started Jaden Reed over Chuba Hubbard and Scott Fishbowl, and I have no regrets.
Must be nice to still be playing in the Scott Fishbowl.
Matt, meanwhile,
smooth 2000th.
Meanwhile, this Thanksgiving, Will Levis got a little extra mayonnaise in his coffee, ate some bananas by the peel. Do you think he can get back on track here on Sunday?
Nope. I mean, look, I'm not the biggest Will Levis fan to begin with. And I saw a lot of victory laps going around after that first game against a bad Atlanta defense. It hadn't really looked that pretty. And why? Because when he gets pressure, he just, in my opinion, kind of fumbles. He doesn't know what he's doing. His completion percentage has been god-awful. Obviously, I mean, last week, I guess it was technically fine, but he's been in the 50s, 40s, and 60s in the other 3 games. And surprisingly, although this may be just because their rush defense is so bad, Carolina is actually the 4th best defense against the pass currently in the NFL. They're in the middle of the pack and giving up touchdowns and completion percentage, but yards, they are right there with the Chiefs, the Browns, the Cowboys, and the Ravens. Like, they are a really good pass defense. I don't know that this front will be able to get after Will Levis to cause pressure, and that is when I really think he crumbles. But I don't think Will Levis is a good quarterback. I don't think he's shown us that he is either. I don't know that he's going to go out there and have multiple interceptions, but I don't think he's worthy of the start, and I don't think he's going to have a good game on Sunday.
I'm taking the Titans.
Give me the Panthers.
I am too.
This is like the hot seat coaches bowl right here.
Did.
Next up, the Los Angeles Rams 4-6 at the 2-9 Arizona Cardinals. Matt, it looks like Kyren Williams is going to come back from IR. What do you expect from him?
I mean, I'm hoping that he goes out there and has a really good game. He was a player that I liked coming out of Notre Dame. Now, I didn't expect him to run as slow as he did, and I think that really kind of hurt his stock, but I do think that he has a chance to be a very good running back for them. We've seen that really in those Sean McVay offenses, you want the running back in it. Arizona, one of the worst defenses against the run. They are bottom 5. If he gets the opportunities that I think he's going to get, I think he's going to be a very good running back this week. I actually think he's going to be a top 10 option. So I'm all in on Kyren Williams.
I also picked him as a start this week. Dennis, meanwhile, Marquise Brown, Michael Wilson still not practicing for the Cardinals. What are you expecting from Cardinals receivers this week?
Man, if they're both out, it's slim pickings.
Dortch, the Human Torch.
I mean, he's producing when they. Dortch to me feels like he gets the short shrift across the board because like last year, Rondale was out and Dortch was lighting it up, and then you would have felt like he earned some opportunities even when more come back, and they're like, thank you for your service. Here's the door. They gave him the Darrell Henderson treatment almost. And I think they need what Wilson brings to the table. Wilson and Brown are their 2 best receivers, and it's not close. And they both bring something a little bit different to the table. Wilson with his size, Brown with his speed. Moore is fast and Dortch is decent speed, but they're both so tiny. Like they make Marquise Brown look like Michael Wilson. They're so small. But they did, they signed Michael Carter. It'll be interesting to see if he is active this week. I've been surprised at how little they've thrown the ball to James Conner since Kyler has come back, because I know Conner was, he was getting a decent amount of passing volume for a back last year and then earlier this year before he got hurt. But with Michael Carter joining the fray, I think that's going to impact James Conner's passing work still, because that's really the only thing the Jets used Michael Carter for was like 2-minute drill. Now, why they used him over Breece Hall, I don't know, because Breece Hall is a great pass catcher, so that seems kind of stupid. But anyways, I think he's a much better pass catcher than James Conner. The Cardinals, it'll be interesting just because they don't have any size. Trey McBride will be their only size player, and Kyler has been force-feeding him the ball, double-digit targets. If if Hollywood is out now, Hollywood may be a little frustrated too because he hasn't been getting the volume of targets since Kyler got back. To me, that's I don't know if Kyler's still getting his eyes back and relearning how to see the field again from behind all those trees. I don't know that if Wilson and Brown are out, I'm not starting any Cardinals wide receivers unless it's out of absolute desperation.
Agreed. I am taking the Rams.
As am I.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Rams too.
Next up, big game in Denver, the 7-3 Cleveland Browns at the 5-5 Denver Broncos. Dennis can be the second straight start for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. What are you expecting from him?
He needs to get his completion percentage up. He needs to understand that you need to get the ball to Amari Cooper. Let Elijah Moore. He targeted the crap out of David Njoku last week with 15 targets. He only caught 7, so you may want to question the quality of the targets there. It's going to be. We need to see Dorian Thompson-Robinson just keep improving each week, keep making better decisions, get the ball to the right people in the play and not turn the ball over. I mentioned it over the last couple of shows that Lindsey Rhodes from SiriusXM was at a quarterback flag football type camp thing that a bunch of quarterbacks did for, I don't want to say like, it wasn't like it may have been a fan camp, but it may have been some other type of outreach camp. And she said that Dorian Thompson-Robinson just had the intangibles. The other quarterbacks at this event were following his lead, and that he seems to have it. And I think I'd like to see if he can continue to kind of express that. It'll all come down to him making good decisions. The plus thing is the Browns defense is good enough that they typically don't have to worry about getting into a shootout with the opposing team.
Speaking of that defense, Denzel Ward, Juan Thornhill, Grant Delpit, all trending toward missing the game. How is that defense going to handle the Broncos offense?
Well, Ward being out, I think, is massive for the Browns because that is by far the strength of that defense. They are the top defense against the pass. And I think some of that also comes down to the fact that Myles Garrett has just been wrecking everybody. When you put pressure on the quarterback, it makes your pass defense a lot better. I don't think that they will hurt them being out will hurt the Browns as much. It'll probably be the Broncos trying to get that run game going. Now, again, the Browns still very good rush defense, but that's where they lack a little bit more. They're still top 10. I'll be very intrigued to see what happens. Russell Wilson has been playing much better than he was earlier in the season, but I still feel like when that pocket gets heated up that he struggles, and I think that Garrett and that front line will be able to get after him. I'm supposed to be at this game, so I'm very, very sad that I won't be there. I actually think this is going to be one of the better matchups of the day. I cannot wait because I still believe that Sean Payton is a very good head coach, and so I'm going to be very intrigued to see how he chooses to attack arguably one of the best defenses in the NFL right now in the Cleveland Browns.
Also supposed to be in the 20s and snow.
I am actually not so sad I'm going to miss that game now.
Yes, it's daytime high today of 21. So we have an Arctic air mass in here. Not spectacular. I am taking the Broncos.
I got to take the Browns.
Yeah, not a shock here. Next up, 7-3 Kansas City Chiefs at the 5-6 Las Vegas Raiders in a game that we probably all hope that both teams could just lose, but it doesn't always happen. Matt, Justin Watson been getting a lot of targets of late. Seems to be one of the favored options for Patrick Mahomes in that offense. How are you feeling about him as a receiver?
I mean, last week he was very good. 11 targets, had the 5 catches, ended up finishing as wide receiver 16 on the week. I talked a lot about this earlier in the year, and I feel like both of you guys kind of agreed with this. Is very intriguing. Liked what he saw. Like what I saw out of him. Didn't love, the fact that Marquez Valdez-Scantling's dropping everything again. So maybe Justin Watson's the guy. I need to see it for a couple weeks before I'm willing to throw him in my lineup.
To be fair, Valdez-Scantling isn't dropping everything because he only gets a couple targets a game.
So he drops one of the two. So he's 50-50. So, for me, it's Travis Kelce or bust right now for that offense. Now, if Watson does it again the next 2 weeks, I'd be willing to throw him in a flex spot. But unless you're just really struggling for players, I would find it very hard to start him this week.
Dennis, meanwhile, we know Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers are doing their thing, but how are you feeling about Michael Mayer for the Raiders?
The Mayer is the future of the position in Vegas. He's had 5 targets each of the last 2 weeks, coming off a couple of 2-target games prior to that. And then he had a couple 4 to 6 target games prior to those low targets. I'd like to see it be more consistent. The challenge is that they've got to get the ball to Devontae Adams. It just is what it is, and he's going to be a target hog. But if they could get 4 to 6 targets to Michael Mayer on a weekly basis, I think he moves into, the high-end tight end 2 range because he'll get some opportunity as in the red zone. He may be able to put up a touchdown. He's agile enough that he can get down the seam and he can make some plays. He's the guy, the tight end you want to roster, but I think he's more of a dynasty stash at this point. Very good draft pedigree, great college production profile, but you're in wait and see mode with him for fantasy. If you're playing him this year in redraft, you're just playing out your season and trying to avoid having to do a loser's punishment probably.
I am going to take the Chiefs in this one.
So am I.
Matt's not here, so I'm just going to assume he's taking the Raiders. That
okay.
I heart Raiders tattoo over the chest thing. Next up, the Buffalo Bills 6-5 at the 9-1 Philadelphia Eagles. Dennis, we've seen Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid getting involved. How are you feeling about those two and Gabe Davis for fantasy?
So Shakir and Davis, they're like 2 halves of 2 sides of the same coin. One of them is your zone beater. One of them is your man beater. And so depending on what the defense is doing, that's who you're going to want to play. So if they're playing man, a defense that plays a ton of man coverage, and Gabe Davis is going to get man coverage, then you want to start Gabe Davis. If they're playing a team that's playing a ton of zone and they're guarding that second and third receiver in a zone concept, then Shakir is the guy you want to start. It just kind of is what it is. Davis has been this up and down guy. If you roster Gabe Davis, you know that. We have a little more insight now, and we're a lot more comfortable with like when we should start him or sit him. It all depends on where you drafted him and who else you drafted. Can you afford to put him on your bench if he goes off for 30 points, which he may? It's a lot of it is about luck. He's out there, he's getting the snaps, and he's on the field, and he potentially has the opportunity. It just comes down to whether or not he gets open enough for Josh Allen to throw him the ball. Dalton Kincaid is stepping up and kind of taking over that. They're still playing that 11.5 personnel. They're bringing in Quentin Morris as the big tight end, the blocking tight end, in place of Dawson Knox. And I think you rolled Kincaid out as a tight end 1, but you have to recognize there may be a game or 2 along the way where he kind of craps the bed on you.
Matt, speaking of tight ends, Dallas Goedert out for the Eagles, but one of their late pickups right before the start of the season was they went and traded for Albert O. Do you think this is a spot where he can get involved at tight end?
I really don't. I'll be interested to see how they use him because Grant Calcaterra out as well. I know he's dealing with I think it's an ankle injury, but I don't know if he's out. I mean, he hadn't done anything since. Grant, it was only one game in between when Goddard went out and this one against the Bills, just a game against Kansas City.
Did not practice on the last practice report before.
So I mean, I would imagine that means that Albert O is going to be the main tight end, but I think they're going to use him more as a blocking guy. Like maybe he gets you something. I think this offense is just focused so much around AJ Brown and Devonta Smith that Jalen Hurts running the ball. I don't think Albert O is going to be much. Start him with a hope and a prayer. I don't know that he gets that involved.
I am taking the Eagles in this one.
As am I.
Me as well. Did
Sunday night
Raiders last pick, Matt?
No, I'm taking the Chiefs.
No, you weren't here. You took the Raiders. Sorry.
Raiders. Hey, let's go, Aiden O'Connell. I'm starting him in a couple spots, so I'm all in.
A poor man's Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Sunday night football. We have the Baltimore Ravens 8-3 at the 4-6 Los Angeles Chargers. Matt, no Mark Andrews for the Ravens. Isaiah Likely getting a bigger opportunity. Last week we saw Odell Beckham get more involved. Who do you think steps up in the passing game for the Ravens?
I mean, I'm hoping that it's Odell again. I thought he had a really good game last week. I know Zay Flowers is he out? I know he's dealing with the hip injury. I don't know if he's going to play or not. He was fairly good early on. I don't feel like we've seen enough out of Rashad Bateman. I find it hard to start Isaiah Likely. I think a lot of people will, just because they'll assume he'll step right in and have the Mark Andrews role. But I'm all in on Odell kind of having a really good back half of the season with Mark Andrews out.
Odell Beckham Jr. was a limited participant, and Zay Flowers was a non-participant in their last practice report.
Aguilar, baby.
Yeah. So Devin Duvernay, come on down. And Laquan Treadwell, that's a name we haven't heard in a long time. I believe he's still on the Ravens. There we go. That's who's gonna be the guys this week.
I think an Aguilar, and
yeah,
there's somebody else. I can't remember.
They still have what's his name? Tylan Wallace, right? From Oklahoma State.
They might.
Isn't that the other one? I know they drafted him a couple years ago.
Dennis, we know emphatically from press conferences last week that Brandon Staley will continue to call the defensive plays for the Chargers. Do you think that Chargers defense can improve a little bit and bottle up the Ravens?
The Chargers give up the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they've given up the second most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. The second most passing yards to quarterbacks. I think Lamar Jackson's going to have a fantastic day. Gus Edwards has just been rolling along. He's literally been the Gus bus, putting it in the end zone week after week after week. Not getting a ton of yardage, but he is serviceable in the passing game. They're using Keaton Mitchell as their shock play guy. And with their wide receiver and tight end situation now, it's going to be – they're going to need production from somewhere. So I do think they go over the top with Nelson Aguilar. They take some shot plays. They're going to try to run the ball against the Chargers and just play a game where they don't have to get into a shootout. I know we like to think about the Chargers with Justin Herbert as a team that can put up a ton of points, but for whatever reason this year – Brandon Staley, they just don't seem to be able to get involved in shootouts. And so against the Ravens, I think this works perfect for the Ravens, where they're okay to win a 27-24 game, a 24-20 game, something like that.
The Chargers are tricky because they've lost 2, then won 2, then lost 2, then won 2, then lost 2. This should mean that they're back on to the 1-2, but I think this is where the pattern ends. I am taking the Ravens.
Give me the Chargers.
I think I'm going to take the Chargers too.
I mean, who knew that you wanted all of these mediocre coaches to continue another year, Matt? You just keep picking them, hoping to see them the best for them.
Much like my fantasy teams, I am all about mediocrity, Matt. All about mediocrity.
Well, mediocrity is a good word for Monday Night Football. The matchup is the 3-8 Chicago Bears at the 6-5 Minnesota Vikings. Dennis, last week we saw kind of a dreaded 3-way split in the Chicago Bears backfield, with Justin Fields being the only running back you wanted to actually play. How do you feel about that backfield this week?
I think that Fields is the guy that you feel like you can count on this week. I'm torn because I feel like D'Onta Foreman has earned the opportunity to be the guy. But Khalil Herbert has shown that he provides something that Foreman doesn't. And then Roschon Johnson, unfortunately, ends up being the odd man out. And it seems like he has a ton of potential. I know Foreman's been dinged up a little bit, and it could go any number of directions. I think this is going to be a Justin Fields game. I'm not really looking to find a reason to force Foreman or Herbert into my lineup. If I have to pick one of them, honestly, I think it's Herbert. I think that early in the season, Herbert was the guy, and then he got injured, and now he's back. And while Foreman performed well in his absence, to me, I think they're going to lean towards Khalil Herbert, but it's probably more of a 40, 25, 15 kind of split.
Well, Matt, speaking of quarterbacks averaging more fantasy points than Deshaun Watson that used to play for Cleveland, we have Josh Dobbs, who's actually a top 10 option so far this season. How are you feeling about him for fantasy?
Go Browns. Just killing it with these personnel decisions lately. I think Dobbs is going to have an amazing day. You mentioned top 10. I mean, he's been top 10 4 out of the 5 past weeks, QB 14 last week against Denver, who does have a good defense. I don't know if it surprises anybody with the 3-8 Chicago Bears, but their defense is pretty bad. They are 25th right now in allowing fantasy, or 25th is in the worst in giving fantasy points, not only to quarterbacks, but just fantasy points in general. I expect Josh Dobbs to go out there and have an amazing day, even though Justin Jefferson doesn't sound like he's going to come back. Never mind, because I saw a lot of people blowing you up on, I was just going to make a joke about that. Leave the players alone about fantasy football. Yeah, I think Josh Dobbs is going to have not only an amazing week against the Bears this week, but continue to have an amazing season.
Yeah, I think Jefferson now is targeting after the bye because the Vikings have a late bye. They go on bye in week 13. I'm taking the Vikings in this one.
Same.
I'm going Bears.
Dennis now is the one that charitably wants these coaches on the hot seat to just keep their job. You know what? We're just doing our part to ensure that no more coaches get fired this year. That'll wrap it up for this week, for week 12. Hope you guys enjoy a long weekend of football. But if you have those quiet times where your wife has taken you for some Black Friday shopping and you just need something to fill those lonely moments while you wait for your bank account to drain, Dennis, what can the people do?
There's nothing like the Fantasy Football Roundtable in your ears to keep you from crying as your wife is shopping and getting. Now, maybe you're not crying. Maybe you're just dead inside. Listen to the Fantasy Football Roundtable. We have a huge catalog of back shows. Subscribe, rate, review. Give us a follow.
And the best part is, as you see that bank account draining, it's free to download and listen. So
that's right.
That's our gift to you. That'll do it for us today. We will be back on Tuesday with a look back at hopefully some scintillating games that we get on Sunday. Have a great Thanksgiving weekend.
Go Bradley Jaguars.